All right. I loved this quote from Wade last night at the event. He said, "We have the opportunity to drive the restoration of nature and the restoration of justice. We do this not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do." So I love that framing for our conversation today. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the work you're doing at BlackGirl Environmentalist?
Yes, my name is Kwolanne Felix. I'm the fellowship manager at BGE. So I run the Hazel M. Johnson Fellowship, named after Hazel M. Johnson, who was a environmental justice activist and often known as the mother of environmental justice. In around the 1970s to 1990s was her most active period. She worked in the south side of Chicago, where after her husband passed away in his 40s from lung cancer and her kids consistently suffered from respiratory issues, she started taking note about the disproportionate amount of pollution in her community in the south side of Chicago and launched the People for Community Recovery. We named this fellowship after her because oftentimes, especially as young people, we often feel like, oh my God, we're the first one ever to just get into this work, to see how messed up the world is. Absolutely not. We're actually standing on the shoulders of giants like Hazel M. Johnson. So the fellowship is a program where we work with young climate leaders and we link them with really exciting jobs in the climate environmental field through a 10-week internship program. But we don't just leave them there. We understand that there's been historical gaps, especially with communities of color in entering these spaces. So we also support fellows through mentorship. We give them, out of our own budget, fundraise $5,000 per fellow to make sure that they can cover startup costs. So for example, some of our fellows are working at Stanley, the cup company in Seattle, and they're from Alabama. Who's going to pay for the plane ticket? Who's going to pay first month rent to do that internship? We take on that cost to make sure that they can really focus on the internship, really do the work that they need to do. We also give them mentors and create a cohort experience with 18 other fellows to ensure as they move forward in their climate career, they know that, okay, there are other folks in my corner who are really excited about the work that I do and who are working across the environmental field. So yeah, this summer we just onboarded 16 fellows who are working across the industry and having a great time with them.
That's amazing. Let's take a step back and define the term environmental justice, because it has become a bit of a loaded term. And some people say, let's not use that term, right? There's too much behind it. But then a lot of people say, like, that is what it is and that is what we need. So I'd love to hear your perspective on defining it.
Yeah, I'm going to actually read the definition as defined by University of Michigan of this very scary loaded term. It's defined as the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in environmental decision-making to ensure full protection from disproportionate environmental and health impacts and equitable access to healthy, sustainable, and resilient environments. That's a scary term. and I can bet you
a lot more inclusive than you think.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the misconceptions that come around environmental justice?
Yeah, I find that, especially as it's become really politicized, it often feels like a term or an idea that is just, for a specific group, usually, marginalized communities. But here I really want to demonstrate some of the histories of these various groups here. When we talk about environmental justice, I think that it's important to not lose sight of that word, just because historically the environmental movement has been, okay, let's save our national parks. Let's work with endangered species. Absolutely a cornerstone of the movement. And at the same time, we know indigenous communities have consistently been fighting for land sovereignty and the protection of sacred land. In the past, that's been just an indigenous issue on the side. When Black communities have been fighting against illegal dumpings and high rates of toxins in our backyards, in the past, it's been like, well, that's just like a race issue in the background. In many ways, environmental justice kind of creates that through line that says that we can't have healthy environments without healthy communities, that we can't have healthy environments without communities that are deeply involved. I want to say, I guess how many people here have heard the term environmental justice? Great. How many of you guys have sat down and read the principles of environmental justice? These principles, okay, we have a few. These principles were developed in 1991 with Hazel M. Johnson and a coalition of various environmental justice groups in the People of Color Summit for Environmental Leadership. I'm going to read it. I have it right here behind me. Yes. I'm going to focus on 7 for this talk, but I'm going to highlight some things that you guys may not have known that are also the backbones of environmental justice. So for example, number 11, looking at acknowledging Native sovereignty and rights of self-determination. We're also looking at, There's also one that talks about 14, opposing multinational companies in destructive industries. Number 8, focusing on safe working environments. I'm missing it right now, maybe a little too far. We're also looking at reproductive rights and ensuring that people who, a part of environmental justice is also ensuring everyone has autonomy over their bodies. From some of the issues I've named, I bet they touch all of you guys. It's not just an issue that kind of touches fringe communities. And once again, it's picking through that through line. I find that when we understand environmental justice as, linking these different issues together, it allows us to open up the camp in so many ways. I would say, in particular, example I think about is Beyond Petrochemicals, which is a campaign that's mostly funded by the Bloomberg Philanthropies. Bloomberg Philanthropies in the past also funded Beyond Coal, which some of you guys may know was a successful campaign that shut down hundreds of coal mines and coal factories in the United States. They're doing the same thing for petrochemicals. Their focus in Beyond Petrochemicals, which we work with for our fellowship, is focusing on Cancer Alley, which is in the Gulf states that have disproportionate high amounts of petrochemical plants there. Their focus there is working with mostly communities of color, Black and brown communities, where these petrochemical plants are in their backyards. We can create amazing policies, we can create amazing research, and we've seen that research really come to head. But as we know, in even the last administration, even if the federal government passes some of the most progressive climate bills to date, it's not just a snap of a finger and then every plant gets shut down. It actually takes mobilizing local communities. So something that Beyond Petrochemicals does is when working with Black and brown communities, we know that that's where those plants, those factories are. It's going to take people in their local communities getting involved and looking around and saying, hey, going to their zoning boards and being like, I don't want this here. Going to their local city councils and be like, I want this shut down. That's what it's going to take. And if we know that Black and brown communities are the ones where these factories and these industries are mostly being planted, it takes mobilizing them to make the demands. So once again, when we think about our policies, when we think about the research, we have to actually put that research and those policies in the hands of the people. And those are the people who get to go to local governments. And we're not talking about blue states. We're talking about states like Louisiana. We're talking about states like Texas, like Mississippi. These states, we are not necessarily expecting their governors or state legislators to make progressive policies, but we can expect local communities to come out, to show out, and to demand that they deserve healthy environments. So once again, we look at environmental justice as that through line, that's how we empower people to really take our exciting research, to take the amazing policies that are being developed down to local level and putting that power in their hands.
And that also relates to green jobs, right? And the work that you guys are doing to try to arm people to work within their communities and to be reskilled or upskilled or skilled in a new green field, right?
Yes. Exactly. I feel like some of the problems that we work with at BGE is we know that, young people, especially young people of color, are really excited about this work. They're really excited about working in the environment. They see the links between their own health, their own communities, and climate change. However, there's not as many opportunities to quite link them to those jobs. So our goal is to look at creating several pathway programs to equip emerging young leaders with these opportunities. And once again, it's not just about getting them into the job. Something we see is even as folks enter the jobs, we know communities of color have lower retention rates. So even though they may stay there for 1 or 2 years, they're not staying throughout their career. So how do we make sure that we're not necessarily just thinking about getting folks into the front door, but longevity? How do we ensure people build climate careers? And this is the program that I run here at BGE, that looks at, that once again looks at communities who have historically been left out, but we know hold so much power, because these industries tend to unfortunately target these communities in terms of building out polluting infrastructure, we also know that those communities have the power to demand better, especially on the grassroots level. So we work with really exciting fellows across the climate sphere, so everything from green tech to policy to education to climate research, and we really arm them with resources for those 10 weeks. So these 10 weeks, once again, I have a new cohort of 16 fellows. So we do work, so once again, that financial support. So once again, we work with organizations to demand a minimum wage around $18 an hour, which is keeping up with inflation. But once again, out of our own pockets, we supply fellows, we invest our own money into fellows with that $5,000 stipend that also allows the companies you work with to kind of broaden their scope. scope. If you're a small company in Maine, for example, you may want to work with fellows who are in Alabama, in Louisiana, but you're like, dang, I don't have the money to, cover that fellow. We make sure we kind of bridge that gap to ensure that you're getting to increase your talent pool, bring in folks that maybe normally you may not necessarily have access to into those green jobs. We also do professional development. Once a week, I sit down with the fellows on a virtual setting, and we talk about everything on how do we sharpen that resume, how do we, sharpen up for interviews, but down to, okay, what does it look like to ask for a raise? What do career progressions look like? What does a master's degree in engineering look like? What does, a master's in public administration look like? So really kind of, demystifying what it means to work in the environmental sector, pushing down those walls so that they can really see themselves and clearly envision themselves, not just in that one internship, but 20 years from now, continuing an environmental career. We do one-on-one mentoring with the organizations as well, and also at the end of the summer, we do an in-person retreat. This year, we're going to be in the Pacific Northwest, and that's just an opportunity to really kind of bring the fellows together. The fellowship, they may be working in person, but most of the time they're kind of virtual with one another. So to really kind of see each other in person, and once again, to identify that this person's in my corner. This person who works in climate tech, they're in my corner, they're a peer that I can rely on, 10, 20 years into the future.
I love the energy. I mean, how much energy does she have and passion are you bringing to the space? Just in sort of our wrap up here, obviously there's a lot of challenges that we're facing right now. How do you, as a next generation leader in this space, what gives you hope, and what have you learned from history? I know you're a student of history, about the possibility that we can see ahead.
Yeah, I think in terms of hope and possibility, something I, want to remind us is if we let ourselves, we can be in really good company in this movement. The environmental justice movement has its roots in the civil rights movement. And once again, it also includes, labor rights movements. So as we look forward in this environmental movement, I want to be in the company of folks who not only know how to win, but also know how to rebound. Politically, we're in a time of rebound. It's, we got a big win with the IRA, and then we got hit pretty hard. So what do we do now? And this is the time where we look at the kind of intersections of our movements. I want, thinking about, workers' rights, interesting kind of tenet of environmental justice also brings in, the coal miners in the Appalachias. I want to hear what they got to say. They know something about fighting, big industries. I want to hear about civil rights leaders and folks who've been trained under them. Okay, what happens when, something doesn't go as planned and you have an administration that's kind of breathing down your neck? I want to be in those people's company. I want to be in the company of Indigenous leaders who have consistently fought for land sovereignty, even when it's been inconvenient. So I think in this time more than ever, we want to lean on each other. We don't want to isolate our movements as we're just narrowly about one understanding of what it means to engage in the environment and to be environmentalists. We want to broaden the camp. We want to learn from one another. And I feel like as we once again rebound during this time, as we strategize of, what's the next step? We've been hit hard. What does it look like to regroup? And I think taking the knowledge of, different communities who are doing this work alongside us, if we're able to recognize the work, I think is going to make our movement much more resilient, much stronger, and, ready to come back better than ever.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Yeah, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah.